Hello, my name is Mapu T. Nagby, a student of Liberty University. Today, presentation is all about the challenges of virtual leadership within an organization or organizations and companies across the globe. It is very important to understand that virtual organization relied heavily on information and communication technology. Virtual organizations, they are also geographically detached and they work online. They might have more physical offices or headquarters across the globe. These organizations also operate differently in terms of their characteristics, their critical components, properties, tip for managing virtual organizations, according to Božić 2023. Virtual organizations are also dispersed geographically, as I mentioned earlier, and that brings up the many challenges that they face within their organizations around the world. Now that we've understand how a virtual organization function, we're going to look at the concept of the virtual leadership. Virtual leadership, as we stated earlier again, is mostly based on information technology and communication as well. Virtual management means that these managers will manage groups of individuals who are isolated from each other in organizations or in geographic locations, according to Božić 2023. These new systems, they required continuous learning and collaboration by the business managers to match the ever-evolving business world. Advanced technology is needed in order for these businesses to focus on running properly through the virtual world. Now we're going to look at the different challenges that are being faced by virtual organization. The leadership mostly have major problems and challenges in the business in managing them. For DiPialo, suggested that organizations still treat virtual leadership as they would in the traditional world. So basically, they don't have much of a solution. So they believe that the same way we function traditionally, that can transcend over into virtual organizations. Most of the solution for the problems being faced in the virtual organization is only being applied to traditional organizations. So therefore, they don't have much of a solution to be able to solve issues within virtual leadership. It is also impossible within a virtual teamwork to be able to control the team members' activities daily directly because of the geographical location of where they are and the organizations being apart. So these situations are there, these problems are there, these challenges are there, and we'll be able to look at them and see how we can come up with some form of resolution or identifying them first and then seeing what can be done about them. We're going to look at the geographic isolation challenge. Workers who find themselves in this group or in this geographical area feels that they are separated from each other. That's one of the biggest issues with the geographic challenges. Also, there are infrequent lack of physical meetup. There is no way that as we meet in a traditional team for meetings, it is difficult to do that once you are in a geographical location in a virtual team. They also lack the knowledge of getting to know each other, which is one of the issues that DePaula mentioned. Next, leaders find it very difficult to share the goals and objectives of the organization clearly because of the time zone, different time zone, East Coast, West Coast, or internationally, you have people on different time zone. Workers are even less more productive because they're limited to physical interaction. And the distance-based leadership makes it even more difficult because communication cues and gestures that when we meet physically, we're able to see and know are not presented, or when you're in a virtual environment, you're not able to detect that form of communication where you'll be able to learn, where you'll be able to grow, where you'll be able to watch the body language, where you'll be able to see the cues to know what is going on, or if I'm understanding the goals and the objectives effectively. Next, we're going to look at the communication challenge. We've looked at the geographical challenge. We're now looking at what happens within a virtual environment when communication is not effective. You got the virtual distance, the incomplete communication, the lack of proper reporting system, micromanagement, other barriers that would exist. Challenges within this includes language barriers, differing perceptions, the need for adequate technology infrastructures. Metab et al. 2017 suggests that different geographical location make it hard for the leaders to oversee what their teams are doing, or how to even communicate or to break down that barrier. Abdulmohsin and Tahina 2021 also says that it is difficult for workers to accomplish tasks presented before them due to the lack of ineffective communication. Virtual leaders, they're more raw when they're communicating than when they're communicating face to face. The leaders also, help with not applying project management principles when they use virtual communication. So the entire communication infrastructure within a virtual environment, once it is not done effectively and the goals and objectives are not presented adequately, the interaction with the members and or the workers or the team members, that crystal clear communication is not presented, the company itself will lose out on its productivity, and you're going to have members functioning at their lowest level because of the lack of effective communication. So the challenges of geographical location and the challenges of communication is very key in an organization who functions in a virtual world to be able to increase their productivity or maximize the goals and objective of their company to be successful. Then we have technology barriers. Electronics data is one of the major need that a company needs to be able to operate within a virtual environment. So team members will need software to be able to function properly. Team leaders who don't have the proper software and hardware to give to team members also makes it difficult for them to function. The next critical aspect is internet. If you do not have a strong internet service, you will not be able to produce or to work within a virtual environment because you are isolated and you are working from home. You need computers, you need software, you need hardware, you need to upgrade, you need to be able to have your entire network set up so that your workers can function effectively. If they cannot have these basic equipments to work with, then it makes it very difficult for the team members to be able to function effectively within a virtual environment. The next, we're going to look at security. Security is critical when you're functioning virtually. If you cannot protect your resources and your data from getting out into scammers and into people who hack into your system, you are running into a major problem. So security is a big problem within a virtual environment. We have geographical, we have communication, we have the technology barrier. Now we're talking about security. Holding virtual meetings will be problematic if you don't have your firewalls built up to protect you to be able to use virtual communication. Abdul Mushin and Taina 2021 suggests that the lack of appropriate security infrastructures to safeguard the loss of important information is critical. And if an organization cannot provide that within its system, its organization structure, you are leading to not being successful. It is also difficult to establish procedures and uniform security sections across all the companies. Critical security management systems are also short-lived. You have interactive group-based communication, which is an issue since the people who work for your company may leave the session without even your permission. So you have to, technology wise, to operate within the virtual world, you have to make sure that your system is fully protected. If you cannot protect your system, then you need not get into virtual world. That is key and foremost. So in order for you to get into a virtual world, you basically have to set up this structure first. Provide the computer technology before you start going geographically, before you start addressing your communication process. Because once you have this in place, then you can be able to look at your communication process and your geographical location. But until you can have your security system put in place, your proper technological equipments provided, I would recommend that you don't start to get involved into the virtual world. And once you have that system put in place, then you can go and look at the other issues that exist. Our next issue that we're going to look at is on motivation. How do you motivate people who work within the virtual world? We don't see them. You don't interact with them as you do within the physical or face to face. And since the face to face is not there, leadership within this working environment have their work cut out for them. And so it says, particular aspect of virtual leadership have been very much affecting their group work. Employees enjoy anonymity since they are initially detached geographically. They're not there from other employees and superiors. So virtual employees, they're on their own. And because they're on their own, you don't even know if they're working. You don't even know if they're there on time unless you have, again, your system set up in a way that you can track them and you can know who's working and who's not working. But even that, you should be able to interact and find a way to motivate your group so that you can have them focus on doing the job. And so the issue of motivation within this environment is critical. They lack the interaction, again, as I mentioned, where workers enjoyed in the traditional setting. There is no physical office, there is no cafeteria, there is no break room, and all of this demotivates them according to Kemtop and McCain 2020. So you're all by yourself. And if people who work in a virtual environment cannot motivate themselves to be able to work, you're running into a critical issue. And so leaders who run teams within a virtual environment will have to find a way to motivate their teammates, their group, their team environment to be able to work and to function so that they don't get demotivated. You want them to be there. Employees, they need leaders to take into account the emotional part of the motivating of the employment. So you have people working for you and you have to be able to manage portion of their emotions. They'll be able to do the rest, But as a team leader within a virtual environment, the biggest issue, which is motivation, as to how you're going to motivate your team members, you will have to do your best to find a way to be able to motivate them. And there are a lot of resources out there that you can tap into to motivate your team members to be able to work and function at the highest level. The next aspect challenge that we found is the lack of trust within the virtual leadership. Team members don't trust their leaders within a virtual world to lead them. And part of it will be you don't motivate them, you don't communicate the goals and objectives effectively, you don't identify proper software and technologies for them to use, you don't make sure that their group meetings they're in there, or the barriers that are there, the language barriers are taken care of so that you don't run into issues. So the lack of knowledge regarding each individuals within the virtual world. As a team member, as a team leader, you need to know each individual that is in your team. You need to make the conscious effort to do that, which Deepala mentioned, because you don't see them, you don't interact with them face to face. You have to be able to understand who you're working with, who's on your team, what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are, so that you can be able to function effectively. You have to identify who's your goal getter. You have to identify who needs help on your team. You have to identify who you need to motivate. And if you as a leader within the virtual environment cannot do that, your team will not trust you enough to lead them. As the leaders cannot even comprehend the communication styles and the personalities of the members, as I mentioned. You got to know who is on your team. You have to know, who is going to make you to succeed. You want your team to win. And in order to do that, each individual that is on your team, you do not have a face-to-face interaction with them. So your best course of action will be to try to connect with them individually to be able to set up your goals and objectives so your team can function at its fullest capacity. Long-term professional and social relationships, they're very hard to implement in the virtual world. And as a leader, this is by Newman and Ford 2021. As a leader, again, there are resources out there you can tap into to be able to understand, first and foremost, your leadership skills as to how you're going to relate to the people that work on your team. Because you have to know their style, their communication style. You're not meeting with them face to face. You have to understand. I strongly believe as a virtual team leader, it is critical for you to understand what a virtual team leadership entails. And once you can understand that and grasp the concept of what is required, you will be able to function at your fullest capacity. So virtual leaders, like it says, you find it very difficult to enhance creativity due to limited social link and isolation. However, you can identify from resources again that are out there how to interact with your team members socially. I know that geographically it is impossible. I also know that organization wise, locally, it might be impossible, but there are things that you can do virtually to make your members to trust you and for them to be at ease with you, and for them to know that you have their back. You want to know them. You want them to trust you. And you want them to know that it is important that they function as a team. Cohesiveness is critical to the success of a team. And that is even much more difficult when we're doing the traditional organization setting. So let alone finding yourself within the virtual environment, it is important that you formulate a program or meta or concept to be able to understand what is required for your team to trust you and know that as a trusted leader, you will lead them to success. That is important. That is very, very important. The other important aspect is relationship. Relationship is very challenging in the virtual environment. It is very difficult to build a relationship with someone who lived on another continent or live in another state. They say in measuring the progress and the group dynamics, leaders will have to monitor their team progress. Virtual team leaders may not disseminate effective values outcome when it comes to misunderstanding. Misunderstanding is one of the biggest problems that we have in traditional environment, let alone we're moving into a virtual environment. So as a virtual leader, you have to develop a conflict resolution style to be able to understand any misunderstanding that evolves within your team. How are you going to manage that? And that's part of knowing who's on your team, their personality, so that you can be able to better solve issues when they come about. Maronkit et al. 2022 says that personality conflicts are hard to manage and they can derail the objectives of team members. And as I stated earlier again, when you find yourself as a virtual team leader, it is very, very important for you to know who your team members are, what are their strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the communication style, what is the learning styles, what are the objectives that and their goals that they have. So once you can understand that from your team, then you can be able to effectively communicate the company's goals and objectives or the group goals and objectives, or be able to communicate effectively whatever project that you're working on to your team and make it group wise. You have to let your team know that this is group work, it's not an individual work. And whatever misunderstanding that would come up from the barriers of communication, from the barriers of individuals not understanding each other, from the barriers of the lack of motivation, then you'll be able to find a way to resolve these within your team. There is a lack of effective group dynamics in a virtual team. So if your group is not unique, if you have not created that group that is unique enough to understand each other, in as much as you're supposed to know your group members need to know each other to be able to function effectively. And all of that will build on how you communicate to them, how you provide the basic supplies that they need and technologies that they need. But group meetings and virtual meetings are important, and how you would motivate them to be able to work and to do what is required of them. So relationship is very important in building a virtual team and trying to eliminate some of the barriers. And so that's one of the challenges that is there. Another challenge is the importance of managing the virtual team. How important is it to manage a virtual team? Virtual leaders will have to communicate and collaborate effectively to prevent corporate disruption, as we mentioned earlier. The leaders can successfully adapt their leadership style, as we keep talking, in a virtual environment to prevent dysfunctional behavior. Alimon 2016 mentioned that. The leaders will have to focus on collective achievement in promoting that individual, collective, because you're working as a team. Information sharing is very critical in all departments where you're working. for the internal stakeholders. It's very necessary, because if you can share and communicate effectively, you will have a breakdown within your system. Collaborative efforts will have to be fostered, to have your people perform in a virtual environment. Team building, team building, team building, team building. We cannot even stress that more. And convergence, they are a very important facets in promoting group cohesion, which I just spoke about. So if you want the people in your group to be cohesive, to function as a unit, you must be willing to understand the importance of virtual leadership. And those importance require that you got to focus on team building. You got to focus on being collaborating the efforts of your group. You got to make sure that information is passed on. You got to make sure it is a collective achievement. You got to make sure that you understand the leadership style. You got to make sure, again, that you communicate and you collaborate so that you can move forward. And we're continuing. The other thing that you have to do is you have to foster a high level of flexibility among your employees. You cannot go and be too strict, because you got to be willing to work with the people that you find on your team, and this will provide a balance. You got to also be able to provide a balance for a work home base that will create job satisfaction in a virtual environment. You cannot put your team members under pressure to be able to produce. You have to be able to set your goals and objectives so they can be done in a timely fashion. You got to promote effective internal communication. Communication, communication, communication. We keep coming back to that. That is the foundation of virtual leadership. Effective communication. You got to be able to investigate and contextual aspects that may increase or impair your leadership in a virtual environment. That is Laos 2017. Also, American and All 2022 suggests that meeting relevant risk and metrics in multiple stakeholders in virtual leadership is very, very important for the meeting of the business goals. Open two-way dialogue with your employees to promote effective dialogue in your business management. Encouraging and informing your personnel provides management with a common direction and vision, which promotes foster organization and culture. So once you understand the culture that you're in, you have again to be able to engage your people, to inform them so that they can be on the same direction. That is to follow the vision and the goals of the organization. And that way you will be able to move forward. So these are important things that as a virtual leader, you should know before you can go ahead and be the head of a team. Because if you don't possess these qualities to be able to manage a team, you will be leading your team into failure. Your team members will not be able to function productively. And the whole purpose of being a leader is to be able to succeed. But to do that as a group, let it not be an individual effort, let it be a collective effort. So work as a team, let your team members know what they're doing so that they can be able to function effectively. To conclude, I can say to you that working across distance is very challenging for businesses. In most cases, the members can lose focus in every meeting, because sometimes if your meeting is very boring, you're going to have your team members drifting off. Virtual leaders face challenges in keeping team members focused. At the same time, leaders have to create a compelling and clear intellectual connections to motivate your members remotely. And you must also set appropriate set of coordinations and control framework to lead a virtual team effectively so that you can control the work. You got to be able to clarify the objectives, which is very crucial when you're leading a virtual team. You got to follow a single site meeting. You have to be there to promote the workers so that they don't lose focus in what is being learned or what you want to accomplish. When the team members are separated, you have to be able to bring them together emotionally and intellectually so you can keep them moving in the same direction. It is very difficult. You cannot compare them to a face to face team. However, you have to do your best to get your team members to function at their fullest capacity. You got to be able to do your best so that your team members can keep focus, and you have to do your best to motivate them. You have to do your best to provide all the resources that is required for them to function. Yes, virtual leadership is possible. It can be done, and you can succeed at it. However, once you recognize these challenges, you must be able to do something to address them and learn more about them before you can lead a team. I do hope that what we have learned today by identifying the various challenges that exist within our virtual environment, this would help you to move forward and identify some solutions to put in place so that when and if you're leading a virtual team, you can lead them and be very successful at it. Once more, I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you. I do hope and pray that what we have discussed today will be of significance, importance to you, and that you can learn from it and apply them into your various organizations. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.